Mark, this is Henry. Sounds like I came in late, but it sounds like you're selling a mineral collection. Well, I think you're
Hang,
muted.
hang on, I was muted. Yeah,
Yeah.
we sold off the bulk of our non-Midwest stuff. The only non-Midwest stuff that we hung on to was our golds and silvers.
Okay.
But we still have a pretty robust Midwest collection. But just about everything else went. Dave Bunk came in and did a big inventory, and we confabbed, and he stayed over with us for a day or two, and we got the deal done. So
Cool. We have a mineral dealer up here named Dan England, but I think he's dealing mostly with copper nickel and upper Minnesota and southern, well, Canadian samples.
uh,
But if you're looking for some contacts, I can pass that along. But sounds like you're past that.
yeah, we are well past that for now, anyway. I mean, at some point, the balance of it will probably get donated somewhere, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour. And got a lot of people in here. Good to see you everyone again.
Thank
And hope to see you all in Pittsburgh. Yay. Not the Pittsburgh, the little one.
Okay. Yeah.
In Kansas. Yeah, for those of you on the board, you may have seen in the previous newsletter that there's the board meeting will be on Wednesday. I've pushed Chris, and I'm hoping that it's going to be at 4:00, which gives people time to fly into Kansas City and then get down to
both the sets for people who made decades or fortunes, traveling great distances.
Somebody's not muted.
In this episode, we're going to meet the ancestors who made those journeys and hear the stories.
Okay, there we go. And so that's for the board. But yeah, there's some great tours, and Chris says that they'll be at least they'll be able to take at least 50 on the tours this time. So hopefully more people will get the tours that they want. Okay, Kelly, are you ready?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Let's try this share again.
There we go.
Yeah, that's well, welcome everybody and Happy New Year. Just trying to get my presenter mode going here. Yeah, I see a lot of familiar names on the screen, and thanks everybody for showing up. I'll try to run through this pretty fast, but it's likely to take us 45 minutes or an hour or so to get through this. So, and this is just a set of slides that I put together specifically for the Mining History Association. And you guys some of you have seen me present on Carlton Watkins and his photography around Virginia City. Tonight we're going to be chasing Timothy O'Sullivan around the West, and he was the official photographer of the U.S. Army's King and Wheeler geological surveys of the American West in the 1860s and early 1870s. Not a heck of a lot is known about this guy, but he was probably born in New York City in 1840 of Irish immigrants, and for sure he died there in 1882. So we do know where and when he died, but we don't know a heck of a lot more about the guy. He didn't leave much behind except an amazing collection of photographs, not only from the American West, but he kind of I would say perfected his craft of field photography in the Civil War, and he probably made some important government contacts at that time, which allowed him to later be engaged in the Western Geological Surveys. But you know, his photography was really for government work. It wasn't so commercial, and he really kind of became forgotten and unknown until the mid 20th century when he was rediscovered and recognized by Ansel Adams, another famous photographer. And he actually bought a folio of his photographs and was so impressed with them that he began showing them alongside some of his photographs in some galleries, and this started really started a great interest in O'Sullivan's work. And today, if you can find one of his original album and prints, they can sell for tens of thousands of dollars depending on the view. So, you know, this poor guy didn't get anything out of his photography, but sellers and collectors are very happy to deal with his art these days. And you know, first things first, really this wouldn't be possible without some amazing public institutions that freely share digital images of government work and work in private collections. So, you know, this makes my hobby a heck of a lot easier when I can download photos and not have to scrounge them off of eBay or go to libraries and photocopy them. You can get really high resolution images off of some of these websites, particularly the Getty posts some really high resolution images. But all of these sites that I've shown, you can find very useful and usable images there. So thanks to these institutions. And if you're interested, and this will be posted, I think, on the YouTube site, so I won't go through it, but this is kind of the collection of books on Timothy O'Sullivan that I've used as a guide to try to sort out, you know, what kind of photos are available, where was he working and when, and that sort of thing. And, you know, I suppose if I had to point you to one book, it would be this Framing the West by Jurovics et al. It's a great book. Not only does it have a chronology of O'Sullivan's movements throughout the West with the various geological surveys, it's got a lot of good information about, you know, his craft and the technology of the day. So a really interesting book. So let's get into it. We're going to go sort of from north to south. I've got about 21 views we're going to take a look at here, mostly in Nevada and a couple up north in Idaho. And we're going to start just west of Las Vegas. We're going to start in the south and work our way north. And this might be one of my favorite views because, you know, as a mining angle, a lot of O'Sullivan's photographs with the geological surveys were actually of mining operations, milling operations, things that were active mines during his day. This is a very interesting view taken near one of their campsites down at Cottonwood Springs. And he just titled it Eroded Strata Near Cottonwood Springs. And there was really nothing to see in the photo. You can barely see some faint trails of the old Spanish trail going through the bottom of the photo here. And today, that same view, actually spanning from side to side of it, is an open pit gypsum mine. So most of his views are old mines that are dead and defunct, and you can hardly see that there's a mine anymore. This is a view where there was nothing, and today it's an active gypsum mine. So kind of an interesting juxtaposition of things. And this was it was actually very easy to figure out exactly where this place was because it's on a sharp limestone ridge with another little ridge jutting out from it, facing this view. And it became pretty obvious to me within a few minutes that, man, I know exactly where O'Sullivan set up his camera. And when that happens, you get just about an exact photograph. I mean, I had to wait for almost 3 hours to get the shadows right, but the view and the location is spot on. And that's very satisfying. And I will say that it doesn't happen very often. So this is one of my favorite photographs for that reason, is I actually found where O'Sullivan probably set up his tripod 160 years ago. So that was kind of cool. And this is what that little limestone ridge and the little promontory that he set up his camera position on looks like today. And it's a really fine view. You're looking down over the little village of Blue Diamond, which is about 600 feet below the camera position. And way off in the distance there, you can actually see the city of Las Vegas, and the building there is the Mandalay Bay. So a really interesting camera position. And when I was up there, I wondered, where are the other O'Sullivans from this viewpoint? Because, he didn't even make a photo, or we haven't seen a photo of King's Camp down at Cottonwood Springs. And you would think that for a guy who had a lame foot when he showed up in camp and had probably more than 100 pounds of camera gear, to climb up on top of this cliff and only make one photograph, I'd be willing to bet that somewhere in the archives there's more photos from this location that just haven't come to light yet. So this is one of the interesting things about chasing him around the West, is it makes your mind think, what have we not seen yet? What are we missing here? So we're going to work our way north up to a place called Hyco Spring. And this is a really interesting place, and it's actually private property, but the owners graciously allowed me to enter their backyard sanctuary, which is where this view is today. And they've turned Hyco Spring into a gorgeous desert oasis, swimming pool, patio. And, back in the day, I wonder who the guy in the photograph was. You can actually see a woman reclining on her elbows in front of him. And he's actually got a naked baby that it looks like he's bouncing on his knee, of all things. So I wonder, it was a bath day for the baby, and I wonder, who are these people? And maybe they were the owners of the spring at the time. Maybe some land records would show who owned the property in 1871. It might give some clues as to actually who these people are. And then about 10 miles west of this is a place that was called Water Rhyolites near Logan Springs. And this is just ashfall tuffs and rhyolitic tuffs. It's sedimentary layers that make these nice, beautiful layered cliffs. And this was an old mining camp, of course. Today, it's very close to the Mount Irish Wilderness area, and there's BLM information kiosks and whatnot. In this thing right here, there's some old buildings, maybe from the 60s or 70s. But the cliffs are still there and look pretty much like they did back in the day, which I find kind of interesting. And the road is in about the same place. If we sort of fade this in and out, you can see the old rock buildings and the road. And the other thing you see is a heck of a lot more pinyon juniper pine tree cover. And that's kind of a common theme that we'll see throughout the Desert West, is the massive invasion of pinyon junipers. There just weren't very many of them 150 years ago, and the ones that were there tended to be pretty small. So you get to see some interesting vegetation changes. And this is a neat photograph too, because he's staged some people here. There's 5 people. There's a guy over here, and there's 4 people here. And I actually ran across this same group of people in another photograph that I got off the National Archives, and it's an unidentified O'Sullivan. So there aren't any notes with it. There's nothing that tells you about where it might be or when it was or anything like that. But when I saw these people, I had just been working with the other photo, and I said to myself, I think I've seen that group of 5 somewhere before. And sure enough, it's exactly the same 5 people. Two ladies dressed in dark clothing, two guys dressed in dark clothing, and a guy in a white shirt and a light colored dog, and it's the same people. So I think I know pretty much where this photograph is, and a little bit more work and a rephotograph could be taken here, and we could actually determine again the exact coordinates of this photo and identify a new O'Sullivan. So that's part of the fun of chasing this guy around the country is there's an opportunity to actually figure out where some of these unknown photos were taken. So traveling on up to the northwest, passing through Tonopah late at night, getting a new tank of gas, navigating by GPS and headlights up into Meadow Creek. I sort of knew where I needed to go because I'd laid this one out in Google Earth and had found the view and probably knew within a half a mile of where I needed to go. So I headed in there, and this was the old Army camp on Meadow Creek. It's called the Rendezvous Camp. And this photo was titled Sunday Morning Inspection. And we know from O'Sullivan's movements that they were camped here until I'm going to have to move this out of the way a little bit. They were camped here in June, late June, and all the parties were supposed to have rendezvoused there by June 24th so that they could head out to Death Valley. June 25th was the next Sunday, so I'm guessing this photo was taken on June 25th, 1871, right before they took the tents down and decamped. So this is one of those photos that we can get a pretty accurate date on, probably within a couple of days or weeks. But again, notice the pinyon junipers. And this is just over on the east flank of Mount Jefferson. A lot more junipers these days. Otherwise, not too many changes, really. It's a pretty barren landscape back in the day, though. And, I knew that this photo was on Meadow Canyon because, of course, that's in the name of the photo, but I really had no idea where the heck it was. But after making the previous rephotograph, I was driving down Meadow Canyon, leaving, and there this view was right in front of me. So this is probably one of the easiest O'Sullivans I've ever found. And it's an interesting photo because you'll notice this white masking along the outline of the mountain here. This was how O'Sullivan masked out the sky because the sky in his photos turned way too dark because in order to expose for the landscape, it required a very long exposure, and the film was very sensitive to ultraviolet light, and so the skies would darken immensely. So they would actually hand trace the outline of the topography with white paint on the negative, and then put a black paper mask around that so that when they printed it, it was the negative with this white masking on it and the black paper outside of that. So what you ended up with was a clear sky with no details in it and a nice exposure of the landscape. But of course, this was an imperfect art, and it led to some, let us say, topographic fictions in a few of his photos, and we'll get to those in a minute. So this is just an interesting flow-banded rhyolite unit that he obviously thought was interesting. He loved bold, sharp outcrops like this. This sort of triangular shape of a bold outcrop you'll see repeated time and time again in his photography. It's kind of interesting, actually. It may not have had too much geological significance to what the surveys were doing, but O'Sullivan made the time to take pictures of these interesting geomorphic shapes. And here's another one. Look at that. So we've come all the way back to Virginia City now. We're going to spend a little bit of time here because he spent a lot of time there since the surveys were based in Virginia City for several seasons. And this was just a shot of Sugarloaf Peak. And again, notice the trees or lack thereof. And today, this is basically all you can see from that view. The cottonwoods have just taken over the drainage systems, and the pinyon junipers have covered really a lot of the barren landscape that drew O'Sullivan's attention. But I think this is a pretty close rephotograph. It's about as good as one can get without taking a chainsaw and cutting down a lot of trees. And then we go back over to Gold Hill, and this is one of his most, I don't know if it's iconic or not, but it's been reproduced a lot. You see this in old publications, and just about any book on Virginia City and Gold Hill or the Comstock Lode is going to have a copy of this in it. It's a very famous photo, and actually it's been photographed or rephotographed by people besides me, and I'll show you a few examples of that. But this is what it looks like today. Those old underground mines have turned into eventually the Imperial open pit mine, which has been mined at various times throughout the years, even up into as early as the 1970s, as I understand it. So the high wall of that old pit is still there. And this is what the mining operations looked like before it was an open pit. So the Reef Photographic Survey Project, which is an outfit run by Mark Klett out of Arizona State University, they were the guys that really first got into this, and it was actually some of their books that inspired me to dabble in reef photography. They came out here in 1979 and shot this same view, and they came back in. And I'm just going to point out this power pole to you because it's kind of interesting how it's the one thing in the foreground that sort of stays the same for us. The trees are changing size and shape. Then they came back again in 1998 and reshot it. But of course, all of their work, and even the 1998 stuff, was sort of pre, heavy use of GPS, and they didn't actually list any coordinates or detailed maps for where their views were. So that's one thing I'm trying to add here is pretty precise coordinates and view directions. Anybody else that wants to go do this, these that I've already found will be a heck of a lot easier to find for those of you. And there's that power pole still today. And it's interesting that the road is in about the same place as it was in 1867, right there. So some things change a lot, some things not so much. And here's one of those triangular outcrops again that O'Sullivan was just almost obsessive about. There really isn't anything in this view of particular importance to the survey work or to anything culturally going on at Virginia City, but it's just a shot up one of the canyons of a nice bunch of jagged outcrops. And this is what it looks like today. Notice it's getting overgrown with pinyon junipers, and if they get too much bigger, you're just not even going to be able to see a lot of these rock formations that O'Sullivan shot. And in fact, this is a pretty close rephotograph, but I don't think it's quite right because I think some of the hillside has been removed for probably aggregate or something. And I suspect his original camera position was actually in thin air at this point. I'm a little bit too low. I need to be a few feet higher, and in order to achieve that, you just can't do it from the right angle. So a few changes here. And then of course, Virginia City, back in 1867. And there's a sister edition of this photograph that's labeled 1868, but he seemed to have actually taken two photos from this same location on probably the same day, because you can see wagons parked in exactly the same place. So I think they were probably both in 1867 actually, but that's one of the interesting things is sometimes the dates aren't too certain on these, and sometimes the names and the labels on them are a little bit confusing. And And it's interesting to try to clarify that when you actually find the place and rephotograph it. But this is looking right down C Street here. And of course, St. Mary's Catholic Church doesn't exist because it wasn't built yet, but it's right over here. And we'll take a look at what it looks like today. So there's the church, there's C Street. You know, a lot of things in Virginia City are holding up through history. But here's one of these fictitious pieces of topography. Take a look at this mountain in the background here, and this confused me for quite a while. Because when you look at the mountain that he has in the background, it looks like this. And I kept looking for, where's this mountain? How come the mountain back there doesn't look like this? And I'm pretty sure it's because of the masking that he did to separate the landscape from the sky. And sometimes, it just didn't quite bear out reality. He did the best he could, but you end up with these quirky little artifacts of fictitious topography in the background of his images. Then we're going to head on down the Carson Sink out to Soda Lake. And this is an interesting lake because when he shot this, the water level was at the level you see here. And you can see how much higher the water is now. And this is due to irrigation that has brought the groundwater table up so much this is around Fallon, Nevada, so it's a heavy agricultural area. And the water level has increased about 50 feet here. So the lake was a lot smaller and, not so deep when O'Sullivan was out there. And he actually made a panorama here. He shot the other side too. And if you sort of focus in here, you can see how much deeper the lake is now, right? It's a heck of a lot bigger and quite a bit deeper these days. So it was a panorama that he took, and I suppose it probably goes together something like this. And he seemed to have posed two guys here twice. But it seems like maybe one guy put on a black jacket between photographs, or maybe there was three guys, not really sure, but these guys appear to be duck hunters, probably looking for some meat for the troops. And now we're going to head up the Humboldt River drainage to a place that was called Karnak in the Montezuma Range. And apparently it was called Karnak because, in the Victorian era, Egyptomania was going and people were fascinated about the things that were being found and discovered and publicized in Egypt. And this became known as Karnak. And it's really kind of a difficult place to get to. It's not easy to find. It's an unlabeled topographic feature today. I'm not really sure why the guy was up here, again, carrying his heavy camera gear into such a crazy place. But he did, and this is another photograph that's actually widely reproduced, and a photograph that has completely fictitious mountains in the background. Because this is what they actually look like. So again, you can see that he probably did his masking along here the best he could, or maybe the best he could remember, uh, and it ends up with a strange looking mountainscape in the background. And sometimes it makes it very confusing to try to rephotograph his views because, boy, if you try to line up the background, it's sometimes almost impossible. So anyway, this is one of the things I've learned about his photographs over the years. And we're going to keep on heading up the Humboldt to a mining operation, the Montezuma Silver Works. And this was actually right outside the original town site of Oriana when it was on the west side of the Humboldt River. Oriana's on the east side today, which I did not know. So it took me a couple of tries to figure out where exactly was this view, because I pulled off the freeway at Oriana a few times and No, that the view wasn't there, that's for sure. So it took me a while to find this one too. And it looks like, probably the easiest thing in the world to rephotograph, but I probably visited this one 4 or 5 times to get it just right. And it's private property today again, and the Duncan family owns this, and two of the guys with the family were kind enough to escort me around the property and show me where actually the old foundation of the mill was, just kind of out of view right in this low area here, and there's a lot of black slag and all the stuff you would expect to find around a mill. So the location of that is pretty certain. And this photograph was actually taken after the troops had succumbed to malaria, of all things. I didn't realize that there was a history of malaria in Nevada on the Humboldt River, but apparently there was. And King took the troops up into higher ground in the Humboldt Range here so they could recuperate, and then they were ordered to come back to the Reno area. And on their way back, O'Sullivan was actually in charge of the troops at that time, and he stopped here to make this photograph. And he got a nice tour of the mill, and there's maybe another half dozen shots of this mill, and it was obviously still under construction at the time, but the owner gave O'Sullivan a great tour and allowed him to make all the photographs he wanted to. So there's a pretty good photographic collection here. But the malaria thing was kind of interesting, and then while I was trying to find this view, right up on the hill above it, there's this grave site of Mary Ann Alice Spence, who died from cholera on 24 September 1867. And this was just 1 month before O'Sullivan made his photograph while he was here. We actually have a pretty good date on this photograph too, because we know when he stopped here, because that was recorded in the military notes. So here's a couple of things that were going on at this time in Nevada, which as a reef photographer, I certainly don't have to worry about malaria and cholera anymore. So things were not so good in the fall of 1867 around here, it doesn't seem like. So now we've skipped over a heck of a lot of sagebrush, and we're out in the Ruby Valley on the east flank of the Ruby Mountains in Elko County. And this place is very close to an old Pony Express station, and it was also where they had set up a latitude and longitude solar observatory for their mapping expedition. And so this place was called Longitude Hill in O'Sullivan's work. Today it appears on the topographic maps as Station Butte. I've also seen this O'Sullivan photograph referred to as Longitude Butte. So, and it's just another one of these sort of triangular bits of topography that seem to draw his attention. And that's his wagon and horses. That's all of his photographic kit is in that wagon there in the view. And this is one of a number of photographs that he put his wagon and horses in, or probably mules actually. So I put my trusty Suburban in about the same place to rephotograph this. Not too many changes except a few roads, and you can see that surveyors get around in different vehicles these days. Otherwise, very few changes in this landscape. Even the density of vegetation and the height of it is quite similar. And this is actually what one of the solar observatories in Ruby Valley looked like. And I've often thought that I wonder if I could find these concrete piers that they had the telescopes mounted on. Those might still exist out there in the valley somewhere. And we know a couple of things about this. We know it was very close to the 115.5 degree west meridian, because they surveyed in precisely every 30 minutes of longitude. And we also know the latitude of this as it was recorded in the old field notebooks. So I still need to go out there and try to find these concrete piers. But while I was out there, I made a rephoto that I thought might be pretty close to this, just based on the outline of the Ruby Mountains back here. And you can see a few bits of that in the O'Sullivan photo, including this peak here and this peak here. So it's somewhere in here. Of course, when all you have to line up is the background and you don't have any foreground elements, I could probably be a mile off here. But I can also probably guess that there's a mile circle within which I probably need to hunt for these concrete piers, and it'd be very cool to find them, because then you would be able to rephotograph this and again know exactly where O'Sullivan was. And the name of this one is interesting too. As you can see, it says Mr. J. Terry Gardner as U.S. Grant. And another photograph I found floating around online was labeled Gardner's brother Jim seated under a tent pretending to be General U.S. Grant. I was looking at this going, why does it say this? Because when you zoom in on it, it just sort of looks to me like a 19th century surveyor, probably getting a terrible sunburn and trying to determine latitude or longitude here. He's got a kind of a worn out looking sweater on, and if he was pretending to be U.S. Grant, he wasn't doing a very good job. But anyway, interesting how names and labels get attached to these photos. And maybe 150 years ago it made good sense, or maybe it was a practical joke or whatever, but today it's kind of hard to understand, why does it say that? And now we are going over to the other side of the Ruby Mountains, on the west flank, just northeast of Elko a ways, to a place called, and you'd probably guess this, Soldier Creek. This is where the officers' headquarters of Camp Halleck was, and this was the main camp that was established prior to pushing the railroads through, to make sure that those railroads would get pushed through. And this now is private property as well. So you may have noticed in the other private property photo that I'm leaving the coordinates off and not showing details of where this is on a map, because the property owners allowed me to come in here, and they actually showed me where they thought this photograph was, because they know a heck of a lot about the history of this camp, having lived there their whole lives. But they asked me to not publish coordinates, and they didn't want people coming to their house, because everybody knows that there's millions of rephotographers out there, and the poor people would just be flooded by visitors, wouldn't they? But I think that this is a pretty good rephotograph, and this is pretty much where the ranch owner took me, and he said, I think this is your spot. And I think he was just about right, based on the really what you have to base it on is this little saddle in the mountains here, and then this funny little sharp peak right here. But it's darn close to the location. So that's where the officers' headquarters were, and they probably planted some of these trees, because they were fairly young looking at the time, and now they're big gnarly things, and some of them actually have reached their life expectancy and are dying. And now we're on the home stretch here. We've gotten into southern Idaho again, triangular rock formations that O'Sullivan was just obsessed about. And this one he called Sphinx Rocks, again, probably hearkening back to the Egyptomania that was going on at the time. Today it's known as, it's part of the City of Rocks, actually, and it's known as the Twin Sisters. And it looks pretty much like that. There's a road going through it. You pretty much just have to park beside the road, and you can get this rephotograph. It's not perfect here. The camera location needs to move about 3 or 4 feet to the right, and then it would be perfect, I think. But it's pretty darn close here. And again, note the lack of trees here. And I've had a lot of discussion with people here in Nevada, especially around the mining camps, where the explanation often is, well, there wasn't any trees because the miners chopped them all down and used them for fuel, used them for construction, used them for underground timbering. And no doubt that kind of thing was going on, but here we're in a place where there was no mining activity probably within 200 miles of this location. Actually, there was nothing going on here. And here is the landscape without any pinyon juniper. So I really think that, the broader story is the pinyon juniper has really been invasive in the last 150 years, and we're seeing it covering a lot of these old views where it just didn't exist. And then one last shot at City of Rocks. And this is kind of an interesting one, and I'll just kind of fade this in and out again. You can sort of see my new image twist to the right a little bit. And that's because I think where O'Sullivan was standing is just maybe a step or two to the left of my camera position, but I'm standing on a rotten granite cliff that is obviously eroding as we speak. And I think where O'Sullivan had his camera set up is in thin air again. And the little cliff face is just receded back a step or two. So I couldn't really hang myself out in space to get this image, but this location is pretty darn close. And again, you can see a place where there really was hardly any human activity when O'Sullivan was here, but the vegetation cover was much thinner. But there were trees there, right? They were there. They just hadn't really taken hold of the landscape yet. So this is our last photo at Shoshone Falls, and according to the King survey notes, they said they could hear the roar of these falls from miles away. And they really didn't know what it was. I mean, they guessed it was a waterfall, but and they just kept going north until they looked over the canyon rim and saw the falls. But this is the first photograph of Shoshone Falls known to be in existence. And this is what the Snake River in southern Idaho looked like before it got really 100% controlled by dams and irrigation and hydropower projects. And this is what it looks like today. I didn't get it with quite the right shadow. I was there a little bit too late in the day. I think around noon or 1 o'clock is probably the time to be there. But the location is very good, and I'm standing on a little basalt bench that I'm pretty sure is the exact same bench that O'Sullivan was standing on. So I think the view is good. The shadows just could be improved by nailing the time of day. And the rock that guy is sitting on in the old photo is, you can actually see it here if you hike around, but in this view it's hidden by trees. But that's the rock that he's on there. So I've done better than I thought. We're done here. And I'm ready to answer any questions or entertain any crazy thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Oh, we always enjoy these, your reshoots.
They're fun, aren't they?
Questions or comments?
Yeah, Kelly, this is Henry Churliv up in Hibbing, Minnesota.
Hi, Henry.
Can you speak to the solar observation process that was going on there? Do you know any more about that?
I don't. I've Googled around on the internet looking to see how these solar transit telescopes work. And apparently they're just looking for the zenith of the sun, its highest point during the day. And you can see the guy in the photograph has a clock in his hand.
Yeah.
So they according to the notes, they have calibrated their clocks in Salt Lake City. And so, it's some kind of a survey process that marks the time of day and the zenith of the sun. And as I understand it, you can determine both latitude and longitude with these systems, but I'm not a surveyor, and you better do your own research, Henry.
Okay, no problem.
I mean, I'll just say that if anybody is interested in these photographs or wants part of the playing, I'm happy to share this stuff. That's actually why I do it, is to share it with other people. So drop me an email and let me know if you want the presentation or whatever. I'm pretty sure Barbara's going to post this up on YouTube, but
Yeah, it'll be
if
on.
you want the full resolution images and the coordinates and all that kind of stuff, feel free to ping me.
I have a question.
We examine the timeline of Anthony Phillips' story. So the driver was between the car and Jerome's
Yeah, who
apartment.
had a question?
The entire drive takes the
I've got a question, but somebody's not
17
muted here.
minutes.
Uh,
According to multiple.
There we go.
There we go. So is there any indication how many of his photos were by his own choice versus maybe being directed by other members of the survey party?
That's a really good question, and some of the books that I mentioned do touch on that topic. The general consensus, though, seems to be that O'Sullivan was given a lot of latitude. He was given his own mules and wagon, and sometimes he was actually even in charge of the troops because King or whoever else was off doing something. And he seems to have had pretty wide latitude in taking a hell of a lot of photos. And it turns out that a lot of the photos I found never appeared in the Geological Survey publications. So they were just sort of photos that he took because he was interested in them. But it's a good question, and I'm sure that King and others did request that he make certain photographs. But boy, the records of that I think we're all guessing, to be honest with you. One thing that I didn't mention, and I probably should have, is, I mean, I showed you 10 books about Timothy O'Sullivan, and there's probably 30 or 40 more. There's a lot of books about the guy, but they're actually books about his photographs, and very little is known about him. He didn't leave any notes at all behind. The only notes that we have are the labels of the photographs and whatever notes might appear in the Geological Survey publications, along with the published photos that were in those books. But otherwise, he was a great photographer and a terrible note taker, is what I can surmise. I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, you did. That's great. That's
yeah,
great. Thank
okay.
you. Yeah.
What's fascinating, we went out there during the COVID for the Elko conference that didn't happen, and so we were on both sides of the Ruby Mountains as well as up in them, and down to Ely and up to Twin Falls, and so and we were just in a portion of eastern Nevada, and the how far it is and how far he had to travel, they had to travel, and he's got this wagon of photographic stuff and making glass plates and then getting them, keeping them in one piece, and the challenges just blows my mind.
That's a really good comment, and probably we should give him some slack for not keeping notes, right? That guy had a lot on his mind. His process was unbelievably complicated and prone to fouling it up. And yeah, it's amazing actually. And it's interesting you mentioned the Ruby Mountains, because there's a lot of O'Sullivans actually taken from up high in the alpine environment of the Ruby Mountains, which I have been too lazy to hike up there and rephotograph. But some of his more famous and more valuable images are actually in the crest of the Ruby Mountains. Some of the alpine lakes up there and whatnot. Beautiful images.
Anyone else? Any other? We're quiet tonight.
That's okay. We can all go and enjoy a second glass of wine now.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly. That was fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, you betcha. Thanks for allowing me to share it.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah,
is-
I just that was
has
great.
there been a webmaster found to replace you yet?
No, and that's one thing
Okay,
I
we
was
need a
gonna mention.
webmaster and we need a secretary of the association. So please think about that.
Yeah, I was gonna add one other thing to the comments you were making about the tri-state meeting out there in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Um, as many of you know, the tri-state was a huge area, comprised several fields in each of the three states, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and in the interest of timing and everything, the major field trip in the lead zinc mining area is going to be around the Pitcher, Oklahoma field, and that was the largest of all the fields. But if you go to the website, you'll find a write-up on a do-it-yourself tour. If you want to hit the Missouri and the Galena, Kansas area, which the field trip is really not going to cover. So if you wanted to spend an extra day out there, there's actually quite a lot to see. Most of the buildings are gone in all the tri-state area, but there's a huge number of foundations and other kind of mining features, including where the Superfund site all started by Tar Creek going in down into one of the mines and then invading Oklahoma.
Okay. Anything else for Kelly or anything else you want to say about the association? I do deeply apologize. The membership directory was due in September. I had a death in the family and have been dealing with that ever since, but I do have that finished. I just have to figure out how to get it to everybody electronically. I think I've figured out how to download it, make it available to you for download. And that information will be coming out shortly.
Good.
Yes, Kelly?
Yeah, good. Sounds good, Barbara.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us again for the MHA Nuggets. And we will see you next month. I don't know what the topic will be yet, but hopefully I'll get that all sorted in the next 2 weeks. And then it'll be on Facebook. Be on Facebook. Okay.
Okay,
See you
good night,
all
everyone.
later. Bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.